Hello and welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piskor.
Before we dive into today's comic, I want to let everyone know that we've got some books on their way this fall. Hulk Grand Design, the Treasury Oversized Collection, will be in stores in time for Christmas, so let your local store know that you want a copy, or maybe you want several copies for gifts this year. Red Room Trigger Warnings will be out in September. The second book collection of Ed Piskor's Red Room. Pre-order that one right now. Let Fantagraphics know how many copies you want of that, how many they need to print, and will look pretty nice on the shelf next to the Antisocial Network. We are also on the road quite a bit in October. You can catch us in the beginning of the month, October 6th through the 9th in Columbus at CXC. Come on out and talk comics with us. We'll also be closing the month at Baltimore Comic Con, October 28th to the 30th, one of those classic comic conventions that focuses on comic books, our favorite kind. So show up there and let's talk some comics. In between, October 22nd, I will be at Jacksonville Public Library for a comic and zine fest. And with those bills paid, time to look at John Byrne's Marvel DC crossover from 1995, Darkseid versus Galactus, The Hunger. So many interesting parts of this book for me. One, this is 1995 John Byrne. At this point, I met John Byrne in 1995. He was doing my favorite book of his, Next Men, getting near the end of that. But this is also the time when comics are really starting to tank hard. And you start to see like Marvel and DC hot-shotting, trying to sell books. So why not let John Byrne, very big Jack Kirby fan, take on some of Jack Kirby's biggest creations in this crossover. We would see a lot of Marvel and DC crossovers following this book, but this is one of those early ones. And I mean, Byrne probably near the peak of his, the end of that mature period of his, and taking on characters that he certainly professed love for. So pretty fun setup.
Yeah. I mean, this is that exact art style that he employed during his monthly Wonder Woman run, and it's sort of a pleasure to see at this level because he has that reverence for these characters. The sort of elevator pitch of it is such a sellable idea. It makes so much sense, man. Galactus eats worlds, so he's coming towards New Genesis, Apocalypse. Of course, a great way to have conflict.
Yes,
it's so sellable. You made a good point before we even hit the thing on that this. Why don't you pull out another comic that came out?
Well, let me just do their final pitch line, Ed. When an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, who will triumph? It is really like...
That's Gorilla Monsoon says that.
Heavyweight fight, yes, absolutely.
But these are two comics that came out, maybe the same month.
Advertised in the same Wizard. These were both Wizards' hats picks, or whatever that column is. Look at the difference, man. You talk about, like, new versus old, a very young artist.
Traditionalists. This is the NWA versus like the cartoony aspect of like the WWF, Doink the Clown versus like Luthez.
I feel like even the title, the logo treatments even have that feel like different eras in a lot of ways.
That's true. I mean, just Helvetica, very kind of functional.
Very static. Here we've got 3D and italic going on, some custom letter shapes. So kind of interesting to think of these as like old guard, new guard, and everybody's trying to sell books.
Yeah.
So Rick Taylor gets cover billing. That is the colorist. And I think the coloring for the most part, I mostly like in here. And Byrne at this point is doing Wonder Woman. I think he just started Wonder Woman a month or two before this.
It's the whole style where it's almost like a Sharpie marker for this kind of stuff. Like I don't think he does like any penciling on that thing and just is dash kayfabe in the pen line.
There's credit down here. It says computer models by John Byrne. Keep your eyes peeled for those because I don't know that I saw computer models. I'm kind of curious what that means.
Yeah.
So if you see anything that looks like that, let me know. Almost garish, the color. We've got coated paper stock, so I'm happy it's not brown, but man, it is popping.
It would be brown if it was on some newsprint like this kind of stuff. And you know what the colorist is trying to do. It's the darkness of Apocalypse versus the lightness of New Genesis. But it's all it becomes one thing.
This also reminds me of like the 2-page spreads that Kirby would do in the Fourth World books.
Yeah.
I think this is a bit of an homage to that.
I mean, John Byrne, he's trying to, use his chops to do a Kirby type story that's paced out, but he's using Stan Lee hyperbole in his in his captioning and stuff.
Pretty heavy-handed in some of the, you can see a lot of text on these pages. I like this choice. This reminds me again of some of Kirby's Fourth World stuff, like the splash pages would have kind of like weird shapes around the boxes and stuff. And you see the New Genesis versus Apocalypse to contrast the two worlds.
It's that stuff. Like, I feel like it was on like Next Men where he had the confidence to just go in with a pen and put these kind of ornate details, do his rubble that just looks like done with a Sharpie marker or something.
Some of these marks to me are very inelegant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's just like being real functional.
Yeah, very fast. And I think that shortly after this, he takes on Jack Kirby's Fourth World, a monthly book that he does for DC for a while with these characters, which again, I think it's clear that he loves these characters. So you get a little bit of a recap on, who these characters are, the Fourth World, establishing it, rehashing the Jack Kirby history quickly. And then we have this coming up. The Source is warning them because there is a destructive force on the way.
Isn't there always?
It wouldn't be a comic book without it. And our first shot of Darkseid looking squat and about as wide as he is tall here.
Just a full chode mode. Piece of granite.
Love the way he's written. What do you imagine you can tell Darkseid that he does not already know? This evil dark god. Very distinct character. It's cool to see how he has developed since Kirby introduced him.
Some cool techniques that John Byrne is using right there.
Yeah, and be interested to see this in black and white. Like, is this even indicated, the circle for the sun? Is that something that the colorist is filling in?
Right.
Some kind of fun graphic inventiveness. I think this inking is probably not people's favorite inking of John Byrne.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that is crazy.
But I think that his drawing is still here.
Oh, he never loses a step with that. Like, he can build a figure and twist them up in any way he wants, man. He knows where everything goes.
This made me think, we looked at John Byrne doing Silver Surfer book early in 1980s, and a huge contrast to what we see here. And that book inked and finished by Tom Palmer Sr., who we lost this week.
Yes.
So rest in peace, Tom Palmer. But it did call to mind like a very different take on the character.
Now, this feels like a little bit more thought went into this background and, try to not think about the color. There's a Mobius component to that.
That's what I was thinking, too. Like, that thin line art even calls to mind some of the early Ronin cityscapes.
Yeah.
Quite a contrast, too, with that heavy inking on your foreground figure. There's just so much happening. I thought this was a cool sequence when Darkseid's Legion tackles Silver Surfer. Perspective going down as we're falling towards the ground. Pretty neat how that perspective works with those characters. And this is going to be a battle. This is before, I guess, the events of Fantastic Four 48, 49, and 50, where Surfer is just a herald for Galactus. So you're going to get some, not just Darkseid and Galactus, but also some of the other characters that surround those characters. And it's a Kirby love fest.
Totally. But when you, with that knowledge, it's like, well, on what page will the face turn be? And
we mentioned how this comes out the same time as like Wildcats 21. You can really see, I think, the contrast in the way color is approached.
Oh, yeah.
Even though this is glossy paper, so it looks a little bit different, it is still those bright primary colors that are being added. And I gotta assume that Rick Taylor is working somewhat under John Byrne's direction or was picked by John Byrne to be the colorist with this intent.
I wonder. Yeah, like I it's just that they had their color guys, DC, and they were. It took them years to catch up, if they ever did during that weird computer color era. Because I don't know that they ever did really catch up to like a Steve Olive.
Well, I don't know if anybody catches up to Steve Olive. I was going to say they catch up.
I'm talking about his crew
whenever they buy
they
buy Wildstorm.
Yeah, totally.
Get the color crew on the payroll. So at this point, Highfather's like, yeah, it's done. Surfer has found this world. He sent the signal out to space. Galactus is coming. Cool. I think that's a good-looking Darkseid.
I love that idea of a herald. Like this guy that goes out, does the dirty work. This is the stuff, dude, where like the panels could start to get murky and blend into it together in a certain way. He uses enough black to sell you on the outer sort of shape of the squares and stuff. But these textures, it's just he is blasting out fucking comics, man.
The texture on this page is really different to me.
It is.
I don't see that anywhere else. Yeah, it's
He used it earlier, like on some of these explosive kind of things, but he uses it exclusively for this kind of thing. There'll be another one or two of them.
And the challenge with this kind of story is you do have to tell us who everyone is. I mean, maybe you don't, but that's how comics were made, especially then, and especially Byrne, that had come through like the shooter era. So you get the origins of all these characters, this being the origin of Galactus, and you see him starting to emerge there.
That's sick as hell.
That's pretty neat too, because you're color holding some of the like Kirby crackle.
I mean,
to,
it's the
distinguish.
the guy's sloppy, like he's just cutting that line in.
And there we go, Galactus in all his glory. I was looking at this and thinking about scale whenever you draw these things, like how big this would be as your original piece, to try to, communicate the scale of this with nothing, no reference anywhere. So you just have to hold back on your previous pages to maximize whenever you're going to show this.
Using lots of blacks on the underplanes of this technology for where Galactus is sitting, and then just that spare blank line for that background really communicates depth in a great way. I don't ever feel threatened by a guy who shows that much upper thigh.
It is a funny costume. Look at how tight the background is on this page compared to like the tech quickie draw backgrounds on this page.
Yeah, that's true.
This looks like he's using templates and maybe French curves and straight edges. Like it's really a tight line. In contrast with some of these other, I don't want to say dashed out, but it's a much rougher kind of line, and you see it in like these crowd scenes. I thought this was a really nice showing the shadow moving across the crowd. Yeah, pretty good storytelling too. I mean, how difficult is it to draw an eclipse, in 2 panels? And I think that's it. Nailed it.
When we had that one big eclipse when I was working on X-Men Grand Design, and you heard the most like yinzer people talk about, yeah, we should be in the path of totality around here. It's like, spell totality.
And Galactus arrives. It's great that he arrives on Apocalypse and not New Genesis, because it sets up like, now we're going to fight. Kind of cool to see him like walking off as a giant and all the defense that shows up. Does a good job with scale in a lot of these panels. It feels tall, that low perspective, that worm's eye view perspective.
Not easy to draw.
I kind of wish these little figures popped a little bit more, because that would further the that sense of size, and they're very lost in the background.
Yeah, there's lots of that, man. Like having some of these smoldering pieces bigger than our guy in black ink, kind of, we lose him in there. Yeah, deciding where there's going to be some depth is arbitrary, it seems. Maybe these are your computer model guys, man.
I haven't done it yet, but I plan to look up some originals from this and see if there's some originals online, because I am curious about like what some of this stuff looks like,
especially how it's aged, because I feel like it's just so a lot of this is just like markers, like is it archival materials?
Yeah, and it's not solid blacks. We're not seeing like a solid black underneath this leg for a shadow or underneath this arm. And I just wonder in black and white, like, how does that read?
And he's been doing these commissions. See, that's like a classic pose. Like Kirby drew that pose when Galactus like falls into a building. Alex Ross did his version. So playing the hits, right? You got to have Galactus trip and fall.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And again, you see some of these little figures fleeing. It's kind of great. This one against Galactus's flesh pops a little bit, but you lose them in other places as well.
When I first read it, I didn't even see them.
Yeah. And this feels like one of those homage panels also. Silver Surfer coming in front of Galactus.
Yeah, this piece feels Adams-ish. Like a Silver Streak or Armor was in this pose or something. You think John Byrne kept up with continuity comics?
Probably. And Galactus is back to work now. He's just that unmovable object. You see it on play there. And Orion is like, we just can't let this happen. We've got to try to stand up to him. If this was New Genesis, like, it just doesn't happen.
Right, yeah. Like, he was just like... And I mean, there's a part of it where it's like, he's got to almost, like, save his dad. Because, like, they're all like, fuck it, man. That's Apocalypse. Screw those dudes. And he's like, oh, it's not honorable.
Yeah, it's funny. If he is to be destroyed, it must not be because we did nothing. It's almost like it's got to be at our hands.
Right, and it's that whole, like, the enemy of our enemy is our enemy? Say what? I mean, that's what he's thinking. That's what he's doing.
Sure. And this is what you come for, right? You know, like all these battles of matching up the intercompany characters with each other.
Yeah, $10,000 pages, man. Orion versus Silver Surfer. Those old fucking fanboys would.
Yeah, and just in case that isn't enough,
Get
put Galactus in that background.
See, you just know if it was like those Image dudes, like those Founding Father types, they would figure out a way to get like max fucking character interaction from page 1 forward.
Hey, you mentioned the Mobius kind of look earlier. I feel like this panel
was some
very,
Inkle shits.
very Mobius-esque.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, maybe even the falling is part of what I'm feeling there. But some of the line work reminds me of that as well. You do look at this and think, like, was he drawing this real fast? This is a 48-pager, but is this a... I mean, I know he's known to do, like, 3 books a month.
Yeah.
But is this, like, a 2-week book or something?
Yeah.
It does feel quick.
Yeah, like you could imagine that he's just like draws the outer shape of this stuff, and then you just go in there with your pen. You know, there's no perspective to it that you really
That's
have to
true.
abide by. So, like, you know, you just draw shapes. You could talk on the phone, Frank Miller, and set up the Legend Comics imprint while you're fucking inking.
Get a little bit of Silver Surfer background. Look at how strange that is. I wonder if that's a computer model.
Yeah, maybe.
Something looks weird there.
There's a little something extra here by having feathering. Like, he didn't do that on anything else. Even when it showed this kind of explosive stuff, he would have that drag that white media. Mm-hmm. But having, like, feathered lines like that, he didn't do that before.
I find this Surfer doesn't look as metallic or, like, fluid as my favorite Surfer versions look.
Right, and I think that's conscious. Like, because, like, Ron Lim was drawing it. You couldn't tell Silver Surfer from Iceman. And that I don't know that was Jack Kirby's intent. So he's going more Kirby-ish.
Okay.
I'm just projecting here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a different treatment. You know, like even having such dark blues on Surfer feels like something that's a little bit different. Again, I wonder, like, is he working with the colorist, directing some of these ideas or not?
Right.
Never know who to give credit to in any of this. And Orion finally just, Surfer's had enough. Like, here's your cosmic power frying him.
I always like that Orion is so ugly and clearly not of New Genesis because he has Harvey Pekar eyebrows. You know, like that's the only thing that makes him alien.
That's hilarious.
Kirby does kind of a better job. He makes him a little more gangly in the face and stuff.
Yeah, those eyebrows are great. It's almost like Desaad's eyebrows.
Got the Pekars.
That's funny.
The Harv's rocking.
And Black Racer shows up because Orion's about dead, so time to take away this warrior to the afterlife. It's funny to think of Surfer and Skier. Gotta have this interaction, right?
Hey, man, if Kirby kept cracking, dude, it would be fucking snowboarders.
And it's enough for Orion to recover. It's funny, it says Mother Box performs perhaps the least of her many functions. I don't know, man. That guy's about dead and brings him back not just to life, but in good shape. Like, he's 100%.
From one panel to the next.
That seems like a pretty major function. But they're underimpressed by it all. And momentarily, they wake up Surfer's history. They let him know what happened and turns on Galactus briefly, something that Galactus doesn't care for. And it's finally like Darkseid has registered a hit on Galactus, pissing him off. And this is another one of those kind of unusual marks there. I'm glad that this is not what Surfer became. Just like a gradient
entity or something?
Outline.
Yeah,
I could see that. I could see people doing that, and it's not something I'm glad it didn't go that direction.
Right.
But finally, we're getting down to what we wanted, and the Omega effect. Erase you from this plane of existence. Well, that doesn't work. And what we eventually come to learn is this is a dead planet. There is no life force on it. And of course, Darkseid knew that, so what the heck? And he just, that's Darkseid, right?
Yeah.
Just pretty much messing with this guy. It's been consumed by the fury of the fiery pits. No life energy on this planet. Why did you fight me? This is a pissing contest.
It is, man. And two of the great, Kirby gods that were so misused that they are rendered impotent. Like in that Superman comic that John Byrne made, literally Darkseid allows himself to go into somebody's apartment, sits on the chaise lounge and is like drinking a goblet of wine and has a VHS tape of
That's right.
Big Barda fucking. Like that's what Darkseid was reduced to. And these are guys, like, when you read that first Galactus comic, it's like, you can never, if you ever bring him back, it diminishes. Every time you bring him back and defeat him, it diminishes him.
Yeah.
And that's been, what, decades? Same with Darkseid?
Yeah, it's interesting to think of those guys as impotent in some way, because, like, that's what Darkseid is saying, is, like, we do what we must do. Like, they're not pawns, but they're not masters of themselves either.
Yeah.
It's like they're, I don't know, who they are. They're characters, and they can't escape that. It's kind of a strange comic, right? Yeah,
and it's the best you could do under the circumstances with these fucking intercompany things. Nobody can let their guy be lay down for the job.
Yeah.
Like, they all have to be powerful. It always has to end with status quo. Like, that's the cool thing about that Spawn Batman, because, like, say what you will about McFarlane, he identified a difference, something that they could do that's a little bit different, and he allows his guy to lay down for the job at the very end with that Batarang thing, and he was able to fucking milk it in his own comics for what became a continuity point with the shoelace in the face for years and years, and why'd that happen? Because Batman did it.
Makes me want to check out, like, Orion. I get sucked into these crossovers now. We had that crossover episode where I'm like, they're all bad, and they all are kind of bad, but it's also, I don't know. There's an allure. There's a siren song in these crossovers for me.
Now, we didn't put it out, but we did Orion.
Did we?
We did. The video isn't live.
That's funny.
It's one of those extras that we did at the time.
Maybe we'll do a back-to-back on those two then, because it's similar territory in some ways.
True. It's true.
Certainly the Kirby, it's another Kirby love letter to this cosmic Kirby.
We'll have no problem looking at some more amalgam books.
It's coming, like, as we get into, especially in Wizard, into the late 90s, there are so many of these crossovers. Like, it really is, like, and not just Marvel DC, right? Like, we've got Image Marvel books, we've got Image DC books. It's just trying to sell comics.
Every time I go into the little back room, man, to couple together some future episodes, Spider-Boy's staring me in the face. He's looking at me always, dude.
That's very funny.
Gonna go, Jimmy?
I am, yes.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel with the bell. We'll notify you when new vids are available. Jimmy, what's out there?
Hulk Grand Design, the oversized Treasury Edition, is now available for pre-order in your comic shops, online, at your local bookstores. Tell your library to get copies. It'll be out in time for Christmas, so it's the perfect gift. There's a lot of extras, and that fluorescent green cover is going to look great underneath the Christmas tree with a red bow on it. So pick that up now, and join me on patreon.com/JimRugg, where you can see a lot more of my comics and art.
Red Room Trigger Warnings trade paperback hitting shelves September 2022. Murder on the Dark Web for Fun and Profit is the name of the game, man. About 60, 70 pages of extra material in this book collection. Get it at your local comic shop. Get it online, however you can. If you want to hit my link tree in the description below this video, you can get it directly from Fantagraphics. You want to read the comics ahead of time before they hit paper, go to my Patreon, patreon.com/EdPiscor. $3 for the archive there. Nearly 300 pages, if not a little bit more than 300 pages up there. Right now, as we speak, all of this material is on the Patreon, and the forthcoming stuff that won't hit paper for another 6 to 9 months is going to be serialized up there. What else do we have out there, Jimmy?
You can subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts and merchandise at the links below this video.
Another great way to support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Given those marching orders, Jimmy, will be on our way.
Read more comics.